Welcome back to this masterclass from the European Open Source Academy about building and sustaining open source impact. My name is Amandine Le Pape. I am the head of section for business and impact at the European Open Source Academy, and I'm going to walk you through how open source business owners and corporate users can drive the change. We have got to lesson 4, which is about finding the business model that works. We have gone so far through a bit of background on the story of Matrix and Elements based on my experience building an open source nonprofit and business and how to sustain it. We have looked at the open source opportunity, what it is and how it can become one for a business owner. We have looked at the foundations which are required before starting an open source business, what is important to get right. Then which levers we can pull to actually make this business successful. And now we're finding ourselves in lesson 4, which is about finding the business models that work for you. An open source product is much harder to monetize than a proprietary one. You need to find new ways of winning market share and bringing revenue. So there is a good news that sustaining a company while it's promoting and growing open source is not impossible. On the contrary, there are very good examples of very successful businesses pushing open source forward and making it more visible to everyone else. There are several proven business models which can also be combined. So it's not like I'm going to choose one and I'm stuck with it forever. It's like up to you to adapt and mix and match. And all in all, this successful business is going to amplify the impact of open source. So the open source business model can be considered via 2 different angles. First, what are we monetizing? Are we monetizing the software, hardware, or final product, basically? Or are we going to monetize a service or the ecosystem itself as a whole? And then on the other angle, it's who is the primary customer? Are we selling to individuals or communities? Or are we selling to enterprise or organizations in general? And based on this, we can build a bit of a map of the different open source business models. So let's position these 4 angles on some axes. Either you're going towards code and selling code or the product itself, or you're selling services in the ecosystem, and either you're selling to the community or individuals or enterprises and organizations. So based on that, the top left quadrant is basically a place where you will be monetizing the software itself for a broad adoption. You are aiming to get adoption from the software. And the business models attached to it may be dual licensing, for example, and we'll get into each of them into more details just after that. This is first an overview of the different business model and how they fit. You can do hardware bundling or just generally donations and sponsorship. Then in the bottom left quadrant, it's about supporting the community user base. So it can be you be monetizing training and certification, or the marketplace business models will be fitting into that corner. In the top right quadrant, you are selling enhanced software for the enterprises. So you're making a different product specifically for the enterprises. So you see business models like open core or proprietary add-ons around the open source product, or managed hosting SaaS, where you just provide the open source product hosted for others to use. And in the bottom right quadrant, you would be serving large organizations with expertise and trust. So support and consulting will fall into that quadrant, and custom integrations and partnerships as well. In no specific order, if we look at first managed hosting and SaaS, where basically you are selling a product, the product itself, and mostly to enterprises. You are offering it as a hosted service, fully managed, make it easy to consume, basically. It works because these users are going to they prefer to pay rather than have to self-host and get into the faff of it. It's quite hard to get a differentiator on that one, because anyone in the ecosystem will actually be able to take the software and host it. So you may find quite a lot of competition. Examples, MongoDB Atlas or WordPress.com are a typical example of the SaaS business model. In terms of looking into it and trying to analyze it a bit, it's been largely supported by the focus on the cloud hosting in the last 10-15 years. If you remember, the last 10-15 years, cloud, everything was around cloud. This was the place to be. It's very sustainable and scalable. So if you manage to provide a service which is good, high quality, and it works well, then and the product itself is performance in terms of resource consumption and how much it costs you to run, then you can easily make more and more margin on top of the hosting. A typical SaaS margin is about 70 to 80%. That's what a SaaS business would be looking for. However, it is not going to work if your customer is looking for sovereignty, because it means you have control over their product and it's hosted wherever you choose to host it, not wherever they choose. So let's look at dual licensing as another business model. In this case, you are selling a product and you are selling it mostly to a community because your software is open source, mostly and usually under a restrictive license. And then if businesses actually want to commercialize it or distribute it or embed it into proprietary systems, they will have to pay for a fee for it. So it works because it gives a lot of freedom to the community. They can play with it, like it gives you visibility as well. But when someone tries to monetize it, then they are forced to either give it back to the common or help you fund the development of the original software. So yeah, as I said, basically coming alongside the copyleft licenses. The thing is, many big corporations actually forbid their teams to use software using copyleft licenses. And if it's a kind of blanket prevention, it can be a turn-off to some potential customers. So typical logos using that would be MySQL before Oracle, MariaDB, and Qt. The next one is open core, which is often a dirty word in the open source communities, but still quite valid. So this time you will be commercializing the product itself, the core, the code, but you will be selling it more to enterprises. So the core of the product is open source, but then you will add advanced features around it and plugins which are proprietary. And your enterprise customer will have to pay for the license to use the product. Free version builds the community, it builds the adoption, and basically creates a user base of people to whom you can upsell the proprietary features. It's quite hard to differentiate because if some features which are proprietary are really popular, then anyone can go and add them to the open source version of the software. So again, we're back into the discussion we had in the previous lesson on finding the right threshold in terms of what is going into the commons and what is the differentiation that is hard enough that people are ready to pay for it rather than go and implement it themselves. Typical logos using this would be GitLab, Elasticsearch, Redis Lab, etc. So I talked about this kind of dirty word in open source communities. One of the reasons is because of a bit of this pollution of open source software with the proprietary one. And also because some companies will approach the open core in such a way that the open source is entirely crippled. So you can barely use it. And then if you actually want to use the product, you need to pay for it. But then you also have the different angles where the open source is still very much usable by anyone, but only organizations who have a professional use of the software will require the features which are being gated behind the paywall. So examples would be to put the features which empower the users in the open source. So that organizations who want to actually keep control on their users will be happy to pay for this ability to have a closer look at what users are doing. You can also, for example, gate the simplicity. Like maybe if you are professional users, then you want a user experience which is very simple, very easy to navigate. But if you are an individual user, then you're quite happy to use the open source version, which has lots of settings and lots of customization, and that's maybe more to your taste. The problem for some of the customers, and for example, governments, is the fact that you have this bit of the software which is proprietary. Like some governments have a kind of only use open source software recommendation or regulation. and then it means that they won't be able to actually buy your open core software. So that's where education comes in, because if the reason the open source requirement is being pushed for it's because of trying to get out of vendor lock-in, then it makes no sense, because an open core version doesn't necessarily lock you into the vendor. Depends on what is in the open source and what is in the commercial version. Next revenue model that we can look at is open source software with proprietary add-ons. So you are selling a product to enterprise again. However, the proprietary items are less invasive than open core. There can be extra tooling around it, for example, like analytics or dashboards and this sort of things. And like open core, basically it keeps the adoption growing. People are using the software, and you just generate the revenue from the features and the tools which commercial organizations are happy to pay for. Ease of differentiation, pretty easy. Basically anyone can build the value they can specialize in. So typical companies doing that would be HashiCorp and Grafana. And HashiCorp was before the licensing changes. As I said, less invasive take on the open core model, more acceptable by organizations mandating open source, because only the tools around the product are proprietary. So you are not locked to a given vendor. The next one is around support and services, where this time you are selling the product to an enterprise again. And basically the software is free, but you will charge for the expertise of your team to come in, to do some integrations, to solve some problems, potentially custom developments. So the company, the customer, will pay for the peace of mind, basically. It means that they have guaranteed SLAs, they have throat to cut if something gets wrong, and they share the responsibility of keeping the software running. It's quite hard to differentiate, because anyone who knows the software can actually provide it. And it's also pretty much easier if you are the core team of a project. Then you have the expertise from the get-go, and it's more justifiable for you to sell support and services. So typical companies doing that, Red Hat, Canonical, that's very much the model they've been using, and very successfully for Red Hat in particular. It's one of the obvious choices for open source businesses. By default, that's the easy way, but it's not very scalable, in the sense that if you want to grow your revenue, you have to grow your team, because it's on a human-based resource that you are building your software. And it also requires a different mindset. Like if you're setting up a company who is going to sell support and services, you need to have a state of mind, a mindset which is around contracting rather than product building. So you need to be used to managing a bench of people who are selling support or this sort of things. It's quite a different approach to business. Training and certification. In this case, you would be selling services to more the community. For example, you can offer official courses, certification or workshops to on this open source technology that's been built. It's easy for companies to pay for this, because they see the value, they get the certificate, they get knowledge, and basically it's like very easily justifiable. In terms of how easy is it to actually differentiate yourself from the rest, if you're doing training, it's pretty hard, because anyone who knows the software well will be able to provide training. If you provide a certification, then first it's only the company which is behind a given project, or the foundation behind a given project, and has the authority to provide the certification. So in that case, it is pretty easy, and not many people will be competing with you providing certification, unless the original project is distributing ability to certify to others. So it's very viable for not-for-profit organizations hosting themselves the open source project. It's unlikely to be a recurring revenue, though. It means you need to constantly go out there, find new customers, etc., etc. It's usually one-off project. Let me certify you, let me train your team, etc. So what happens sometimes, it's a typical a revenue model which is going to be added to something else. So for example, if you do a support and services product like Red Hat, well, you can easily add training and certification to it. So it's a bit of a complement. On the next one, looking at marketplaces and ecosystem, basically the open source project becomes a platform by itself, and the company is going to monetize it through either plugins or partnerships or marketplaces, etc. So it works because it leverages the network effect. It leverages the community who is going to build extensions or specific features, and basically the customer goes and pays for these extensions. How easy is it to differentiate yourself in this market? Average. Basically, once you're in and popular, especially as a marketplace, then it's hard to be displaced. It's become, for example, if you look at Google Play for Android, how many people actually get their applications from other marketplaces? It's like once you're entrenched, you're pretty secure. Not all open source products are fit for this model, so it really depends on what you're doing. But when available and once the revenue model is established, it can be a really good scalable source of revenue. And in terms of companies doing that, WordPress is a good one, Eclipse, Kubernetes, etc. The next one is around hardware bundling, where you will be selling a product mostly to the community and the individuals. And the idea is that basically you have open source hardware with open source software on top of it. But if your customer wants to use it, they will have to pay for the hardware. And the idea is that the software increases the adoption because it makes it easier for end user to use the hardware. But people have to buy the hardware, which on one hand is justifiable. You need to buy the materials, but then you can add a bit of profit on top of it to make it worthwhile. So if you have all the software ready on top of which people can build applications, then they will want to go and buy your hardware for it. How easy is it to differentiate? Pretty easy. Others can reproduce the hardware, but like reproducing, like building hardware efficiently, etc., is quite a tricky problem to tackle. So that's where your value is coming in. Typical logos: Arduino, Raspberry Pi, Purism, all these guys make the hardware available with some value-add software on top of it. The software itself is free, but the hardware isn't. So even if the hardware is open source, it's easily justifiable to make it a paid product to cover these material costs. And eventually, donations, sponsorships, grants. You're selling the product to the community, and you get funding from end users, you get funding from non-profits or companies who actually use your software. It works well for community-driven projects, especially if they're mission-driven. If you're trying to solve privacy, if you're here for education or research, then you will easily get some sponsorship or donations to support your cause. Pretty easy to differentiate because only the organization who is backing an open source project can safely ask for donation to support the project. So typical organization will be the Mozilla Foundation, Blender, Open Collective, etc. There is rarely a simple way for organizations to donate. So not every organization will have a budget line saying donate to open source projects, and then often you would have to justify, so why are we donating to them and not them, and why are we donating this amount rather than this amount, blah blah blah. So it's not always easy to for people to actually pay, but it's a valid business model and works in some places. Thunderbird is a good one as well. I know that they have a lot of donations to support the development. And the other problem is that the donation may not be recurrent. You may get a one-off grant, or a company may say, oh, this year we have decided that our open source budget line is going to you, but it's up to the organization to set it up as a kind of recurring service. Yeah, the last bullet around a bit of a critical problem, like how do we determine what is the right level of donation? when all you do is you provide some software, but it's not a product that you can compare to others. It's something which is available out there. Determining the price of this is pretty complicated. And eventually, there are a lot of hybrid approaches, because in the end, if you just choose one revenue model and that's it, it's a bit like putting all your eggs in one basket. So if you actually take several of these revenue models and blend them, it gives you a lot of diversification of where your revenue is, allows you to accumulate a different revenue stream. But also if one of them is doing less good one year, then maybe the other is compensating. So it brings resilience to your business to mix up where it's coming from. So typical example, Red Hat, I touched on it. You have the support and services, certification and training, and some proprietary add-ons. MongoDB does open core as well as managed cloud and proprietary add-ons. At Element, we do some open core and support and services. We have the managed cloud, proprietary add-ons as well. So basically, depending on what the product you actually provide and develop, then there may be different revenue stream you can leverage to support your business. So how do you select your business model? Of all of these, how do you say, okay, I'm going to do this way or this way or this way? So it depends on many criteria. It's not a choice you make out of nowhere. You have to consider the overall setup, the overall environment, and what you're trying to achieve, what you have at your disposal. Like basically, we've listed like 5 of them that you can look at and which are going to help you make a decision. The first one is the type of open source project or product that you are developing. Is it an end user facing app, an infrastructure product, a library? Like based on that already, it's going to close some of the doors. Some of the revenue models will not make sense. The second one is your position in the ecosystem. Are you the founding team or not? Same thing, depending on where you stand, some doors are going to be closed to you. It's going to be much harder to provide expertise if you're not the founding team. It's going to be almost impossible to provide certification if you're not the project behind the organization behind the project. So that really defines where you should be going. Then the market, which is going to use it. Are you selling to individuals or governments or enterprises? Not all of these people will be ready to pay for the same things. Some of them want to pay for the ease and the usability. Some others want to pay for control. And then the fourth one would be your goals. What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to bring revenue to support the project as a kind of baseline and stay alive, like, for example, the foundation may do? Or are you focused on building a successful and profitable company with a goal to grow and increase revenues? And eventually your DNA. Who is your team? What is your background? Are you more someone who is used to sell services? Are you more someone who knows how to manage a team who is sold to customer? Or are you good at building products and that's all you know, and you don't know how to manage a team of contractors? So in any case, if there is one thing, like you need to prioritize recurring revenue. You should optimize for this at all costs. Because if you manage to land a customer who is going to pay you regularly every month and year with renewals, then you make the effort once to get the customer in. And then it's just a matter of making sure they're happy and continuing to use the software. It is much more expensive to acquire a customer than keep them on board. If you sell products or services which are paid as a kind of one-off, it means that as soon as it's finished, you have to go and spend the effort to find another customer. It's basically called the cost of acquisition of customers. If for each dollar you acquire the customer once, the dollar is going to be much cheaper than every time you need to acquire the customer again. So let's look at a few examples based on all these 5 value capture models, the 5 items which allows you to make a decision. If you are building a user-facing app, depending on who you sell to, you will be able to put a paywall either on the simplicity on the product, because that's what your customer values, or the complexity of the product or the user experience, basically, because they want to be able to customize it. So it depends on what you sell. If you are building an end-user facing application, something you can monetize is also the branding, because your customer wants their users to see their brand. That's something you can easily put behind a paywall. If you are building an infrastructure product, so the end user is not going to see it at all, or if I say end user, the end user is a technical person, basically. They will probably value the performance, the scaling, or potentially the certification of your product. Then looking at your position in the ecosystem. If you are the founding team, you have a strong knowledge of the product and you can sell your expertise very easily. If you are the community, you can sell extensions on the marketplace. If looking at your market, if you're selling to consumer, they will probably want to pay for the ease of using your product. So typically hosting. It's easy to sell a SaaS platform if you are selling to a consumer. They may want to pay for more volume. So if it's a messaging app, then you can send bigger pictures because you pay the subscription or this sort of things. If you are selling to businesses, they will probably look for some level of compliance or integrations to their own systems and support, because they want to make sure that if something goes wrong, there is someone they can turn to. And if you're selling to governments, then same thing, they will want compliance. They will probably want managed services, but for on-premise deployment. They will not want SaaS. And if you look at your DNA, if you have a background of service, then you will want to sell support or custom development. If you have a background of product building, then you will go towards more open core models where you can put some key features into the product that people can pay for. So that should give you a bit of a first approach, like sitting down, this is what I'm trying to build. If I'm able to answer the 5 questions of who I'm selling to, etc., then the list of business models starts to reduce and it's much easier to make a decision. So in terms of real life example, I'm going to share how we've approached it from the Element perspective. So when we started this, we had the following constraint. First, one of the mission is to make sure that Matrix is successful and it's a vibrant ecosystem. So when anything we contribute to open source should help everyone in the ecosystem. So we need to make sure that things that we developed are not completely cutting the grass under the feet of the other players of the ecosystem. We have another mission, which is to ensure that the Matrix network itself grows. We need as many users as possible in the Matrix network. So we want the members of the ecosystem, so be it community or individuals, to be able to run the small Matrix deployments. We need the open source product to be usable in a way which is valuable for them. We cannot cripple it. If someone deploys a Matrix server and use the Element app open source and are not able to, send a picture, that's never going to work. Like, the project is going to hit a wall. So we need the open source product to be as usable as possible. We also had the constraint that we had a lot of traction from governments looking for sovereignty and that was since day one. So that was our first customer, first person to tap on our shoulder was the French government saying, I want a messaging system that I can run myself wherever I want. First, it means that it restricts what you can put into the proprietary bucket. Second, SaaS was not a valid model. Like, no government are going to use SaaS. There are several features that the general public don't care about, but governments actually value. And then the fourth point was that we wanted to build a scalable company. We had done services before, and it wasn't fun. Like, the fact that if you need to increase your revenue, you need to increase your team, and then having to manage this like huge cost base, it's like, that's not what we wanted to do. We had made a decision that we wanted to be a product company and pushing back very hard on support and services. So based on all these kind of inputs, our plan was to build a product company with an open source product which was providing enough feature for individuals and small companies, organizations to use, that it should be liberally licensed because we wanted the ecosystem to grow. We would put all the features which were undermining our end-to-end encryption behind a paywall. Like the default usage is end-to-end encrypted communication. If you're a government and you want an antivirus, you are breaking end-to-end encryption somehow. You're introducing a weakness, and that should be paid. And all the features which benefit only professional organizations will be behind a paywall. And we also decided to run a SaaS platform. So what really happened? That was the plan. What really happened was that our customers wanted sovereignty and self-hosting, so the SaaS platform was not very much a good idea. They wanted customization and forking, so they really wanted to buy professional services, which we said we don't want to do. They had a big requirement for open source, which meant that it was complicated to sell them some proprietary code with proprietary enterprise features. But then they can also not pay licenses on open source software neither. So that was a bit of a problem. Governments never have money. Like every customer will say they don't have money, but governments are even worse. So they will manage with whatever is free at any cost. They have a procurement system which makes it easier to actually hire contractors to fork and develop than buy anything from anyone. And eventually, governments do tenders to find their supplier, which is good, like let's find the best provider in the market. But often they base the tender on price. And what happens when in an ecosystem you have a company which builds a software and has to support the costs, and then you have a free rider who don't have any costs to build the software answering the same tender? Well, of course, if you don't have costs, you can have low prices and win tenders. So it really favors all the freeloaders. So what we have done in the end, we had the plan. We had the constraints from our very specific public sector market. We said SaaS is not helping, so we turned into building a nicely packaged operator. We said that we didn't want to sell professional services. We ended up having no choice but selling some, but adding conditions to it, like linking it to recurring revenue. We had the problem that they couldn't buy proprietary software. Well, we don't have solutions for that yet. We still haven't found out how to convince people that they should pay for open source in a recurring manner. We had customers which never had money and were happy to use whatever was free. So we ended up holding back the key enterprise features and basically making the free version unusable for this very specific market. And we had the problem that governments makes it easier, the procurement process makes it easier to hire contractor than buy. Still have no solution to that one either. And the fact that they base their tender on prices, we have switched the license to AGPL with a copyleft, which meant the freeloaders couldn't modify the software and sell it without getting a commercial license. And there is also a lot of evangelism going on, working with the customers, making sure that in the tenders, they request a support to the upstream. So that was a lot of information, but in short, sustaining a company whilst promoting and growing open source is not impossible. So that's clear. There are a lot of business models which are already proven and make successful companies, and we can classify them. What do you sell and who you sell to? But in the end, to determine what will make your business a success, then you need to consider different dimensions. You need to look at the type of open source project and product that you use or you build. You need to look at your position in the ecosystem. Are you the founding team or not? You need to look at your target market, because you need to refer to what they will value. You need to look at your goals. Are you just trying to be sustainable or actually make profits and grow? And you need to look at your DNA. Are you a product company or a services company? On top of that, it's interesting to think about the fact that most of the successful open source companies really think of open source as the adoption engine, and then monetize the convenience, the trust, and the enterprise features. when you do that, you can then take the revenue and invest it even more into the open source side. So it can be more development or evangelization, and basically you increase the impact that open source is having overall. The market doesn't make it easy, and we definitely have a lot of evangelization and educational work to do, but that's basically what we should be aspiring for.